So I think it could be beneficial for listeners to hear what your thinking process and action process was leading up to it, and how you handled yourself in the immediate aftermath of leaving investment banking.
Yeah, so I want to. I'll definitely answer that, and I have a lot to kind of share there. But I want to circle back on something I said earlier with like what I might say with my buddies versus like what I would want to say in public. This is actually a great example. Like with my friends in banking, we joke around and be like, banking sucks. Like this is awful. But like realistically, if we're and we all observe this to be true, I think, or most of us that I was friends with, is we know damn well it doesn't suck. We're making great money. Like we're learning a lot. But it's fun to say like it sucks, when you're just like joking around. And that's something where like in a different context, kind of things can be. I don't think everything said in a private conversation is intended, especially among groups of people, is intended to be shared broadly. So that's kind of what I was getting at before. Um, to address your question more directly and talk about what I was thinking leading up to leaving and in the immediate aftermath, I wrote a pretty good blog on this. I think it's one of the reasons for writing my blog that I think is really cool is I can read back and kind of know where my thoughts were at a certain time in my life. And so like when I'm 40, I'll have a really good sense if I want, and if I want to go read back, I'll have a really good sense for what a lot of my thoughts were when I was 25.
Yeah.
And so one of the posts I wrote was, why I quit my job as an investment banker. And I started off by saying something like, banking is something that it's an interesting phenomenon because everybody wants to get in and everybody who's in wants to get out. And the reason for that is that, and everyone's an over exaggeration to some degree, but it's an attractive job because you get paid a ton, you learn a ton, and you have a lot of options on the way out where you just pay your dues for a year or two, and longer if you want, but all it takes is like a year or two. And you can then get a number of really attractive jobs, whether it's like private equity, hedge funds. A lot of it's within finance, but finance is an industry that gets paid really well, and people want money for good reason, and so it's just an attractive way to go in a world where a lot of people want to kind of optimize for optionality. And I was no different. So I was fortunate to get a job with a technology mergers and acquisitions group because I was I was interested in technology. What I said was like technology changes the world and money runs it. So it's good to know a little bit about both. Um, got the job, did a couple of years, was lucky to make some good money, live comfortably in San Francisco and New York, but realized at the end of the day I didn't want to climb the ladder there. So let me think about like what were some of my main considerations at that point. One thing I thought about was like I mentioned Bezos earlier. He has a good framework that he talks about for how he decided to start Amazon. It's called like regret minimization framework or regret minimization something. Basically, he fast forwards himself to like when he's 80, and he's like, "What do I think is more likely that I would regret quitting my job at the hedge fund for him and starting this company that I think is a good idea, or not doing it?" And that made it really clear for him that not doing it would be the thing that he would be much more likely to regret. And for me, it was like, what am I going to regret? You know, not doing a third year in banking or not, following my gut, uh, believing that there was something better out there for me that I could kind of bet on myself to find something that would, would just be better along, every dimension for what I wanted to kind of do with my life and bet on myself. And, it became really clear to me that that incremental third year in banking wasn't, I don't think I was going to regret passing that up.
Yeah.
Versus, taking this opportunity, very fortunate, don't have like a family yet or many obligations, and had saved some money from a couple years in banking to buy myself some time. And that became kind of a really interesting option. So that was the start of it. And then I can talk a little bit about, how I set myself up for that and what I went and did kind of immediately after too.
Yeah. I definitely want to get into that. I want to just mark the the regret minimization framework, because I think that's a super interesting insight from Bezos, and that seems like it would be a great tool to do that throughout, maybe once a year or maybe once a quarter, to write out what you think your biggest regrets will be in life at that time. If you kind of project your life, 50, 60, 70 years into the future, and you look back on it, what do you think you'll regret the most? And so it's obviously it's worked out pretty well for Bezos in terms of what he's wanted to achieve with wealth and creating a company that infiltrates pretty much every aspect of society in some way or another. And that regret minimization framework sounds like something that, yeah, would be good for the average person to go through. I'm definitely going to think more about that now in terms of what do I think I'm going to regret most. I've thought that periodically by chance when I'm making certain decisions where I kind of project forward and think, well, I regret not doing this, but I haven't really adopted that as a mechanism of decision making.
Yeah, I think it's a great one, and I think even you could certainly kind of take some time to think about it every quarter, every year, whatever it might be. But I think it's not tremendously important um, on a regular basis as much as it is when you have a big decision or something that your gut is telling you that your mind might be telling you otherwise. For me, like especially being within banking, quitting without a job is very unusual, and so it's anytime you go away from the beaten path, it's harder to convince yourself. You need more conviction, and and even if your gut is sending you that way, or your heart or your intuition or whatever you want to call it, your mind is so trained by the world that we live in that it's hard to allow it to give way to that other thing that's driving the decision. But when you put it in the regret framework and you think not like in a few years will I regret this, because that's a little bit different. In a few years I could have thought reasonably like, if I did that like third year in banking, I could have probably been at like a more accelerated path right now, or something like
Mm-hmm.
that in like my career. But when you do age 80, um you realize on the one hand, none of these decisions, I mean, maybe they matter, but maybe not. And it's more than that. It's very hard to like, I'm a big believer in the butterfly effect, that like very small things can end up totally changing your life. The butterfly effect like comes from the concept that
Mm-hmm.
a butterfly, for those listening, you might be familiar, but a butterfly like flaps its wings in Argentina and like there's an earthquake in California, or I'm making up those places, but it's something like that. Um,
Yeah.
and that's something that I believe in. So you can't possibly know what small decisions that you're going to make that are going to be those. But when you feel like it's a big decision and you project yourself to age 80 and you look back, it's like 3 years in banking versus 2 years in banking, I wouldn't even know the difference, versus a year to explore my interests. And my immediate plan was I bought a one-way ticket to Italy and spent a week there with my girlfriend, and then traveled by myself for a little bit and met a buddy in Japan, and first time in Asia, first time in Japan, and that was an awesome few weeks. And he was on a longer trip traveling, and did some writing along the way, and got back and was in just a much different state of mind. I learned how to budget really like for the first time, because when I was in banking, you don't really need to worry, not to sound like
Yeah.
whatever, but you don't really need to keep too close of an eye on what you're spending.
Mm-hmm.
So learned how to, spend in a little bit more of a reasonable way, and learn kind of the value of money, and like, well, do I just want to blindly work, 80 hours a week or 70 hours a week or whatever it is, so that I don't have to worry about money? Or do I actually want to, get my costs reined in a little bit so I can, Actually not really. Like for the last year plus, I haven't made any income from working, and I've been able to live off the appreciation of, by investing the money that I was able to save from banking it. And that's something I never could have imagined.
Mm-hmm.
I figured that I would be eating some slow burn of some sort when I quit, but I obviously didn't foresee COVID. Moved home, so saved on rent, and have done some Airbnbs and things like that. And eventually I'll need income, of course, but there's a lot of different ways to go about living, and people tend to obviously gravitate towards some norms. But the internet, for one,
Yeah.
has made some things interesting, and doing things like we're doing right now is something that people just weren't doing 10, certainly not 20 years ago.